Unveiling, which is an interpretation of the book of Revelation. Totally different than the standard. Standard interpretation is this is a book about the end times and all the tribulation that we're going to go through. But in this book, we're presenting an entirely different take on it, which is the whole book is a symbol, teaching and symbols, the progression of the disciple from the time that he really begins to wonder about his purpose in life to eventually achieving enlightenment and then becoming like Christ himself. And we're going to turn the first part over to Tyler. He's going to comment on Revelations chapter 4, verses 3 through 4. Want to take the helm there, Tyler?
Yes, thank you. Do I have screen sharing ability? Can you enable that for me?
Yeah.
I don't need it right away, but I will use that in a minute.
Where do I do that at?
I don't know. Maybe
The security icon that looks like a shield.
The bottom, it has a share screen icon.
No, it's not the share screen icon, it's the security icon. You have to enable screen sharing for participants.
Oh, enable.
Upper left.
I know I've done it before. Allow participants to share screen. There it goes. I think that should do it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you for asking me to do this. You gave me an opportunity to study the scriptures in a way that I haven't done in a long time.
Oh, okay. Try 11.5.
Okay, let me put everybody on mute here. Make sure everybody puts themselves on mute unless you're talking.
So as I was doing this is going to be off topic just for a few seconds. As I was doing my research on this, I was going through my past emails from the Keysters. You know how we used to be on the Yahoo groups and the Keysters, and I came upon a post about Bitcoin, and this was in May 16th, 2011. And Hawkeye, I don't know who that is.
That's
I don't. Who is it?
Oh no, that's Dan. I think either Dan or Blaine. I can't remember which one.
Blaine.
Yeah.
So May 16th, 2011, and he's talking about Bitcoin, and Bitcoin at that time was as $8 per Bitcoin.
Really?
So if we would have put a couple $100 into Bitcoin at that time, we'd have quite a lot of money. and maybe some of us did. Another thing, this is just kind of a commentary. I really miss the format of the Keysters Yahoo group. Facebook is really good at some things as far as sharing information and things like that. But as far as having conversations that you can continuously monitor, it's not as strong. It's possible to do that, but it's
I
not
like that format too. It's too bad that we had to leave.
So there may be other options. I know we don't want to spread our forces and too much, but there may be other options if we want to kind of recreate that type of idea where we can post topics and really follow up on them and have kind of a continuity of talking. There may be some other options that we can use in addition to Facebook. So what I'm going to talk about is not exactly what you talked about in your interpretation, JJ. So I hope I'm not like reaching too far. I know in in the previous section, Revelation 4, verses 1 and 2, you say this: the reader may not have a problem with skipping the orthodox interpretation, but may ask if there's only one real meaning behind the symbols. Doesn't all scripture have multiple layers of interpretation and more than one meaning? And then says there are always a number of interpretations that apply to any inspired writing, but they will harmonize with the law of correspondences. Just because someone gives a different explanation does not mean it's true. If the exegesis does not correspond correctly, then one may rest assured that it's outright wrong. For every right explanation of Revelation, there are 100 that are incorrect. So I think I found enough solid connections between what I'm going to talk about that I think the law of correspondences applies. And you can make your own judgment on that. So to begin, there are a number of people that we're going to talk about. And if someone can tell me, I'm saying this a little facetiously, kind of the connection between them. Well, we're going to have John, Moses, Aaron, Joseph Smith, and J.J. Dewey. So if there's a connection between these people, maybe you can let me know. In order to really understand what the verses 3 and 4 are about, it's going to be helpful to just briefly touch on what we talked about last week, which is verses 1 and 2. And so I'll just read those really quickly. And as a background, we've come to the point where the seeker has now reached a point of decision, and he has made the decision to proceed and to follow the path of the disciple. And it says, after this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven. And the first voice which I heard was as if it were a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. Now, with at least a lot of verses in the book of Revelation, you could read past these and not think, not take another second to even contemplate on them. But there's just so much in here. And so I'm just going to do this again as a summary to help lay the foundation for what I'm going to talk about. The first question: what is the door which was open in heaven? The shut door is the barrier between spirit and matter. The interplay between spirit and matter is soul energy. The opening of the door is the mind and heart of the disciple swinging open wide to allow circulation of energy between two worlds. What does the door in heaven have to do with the Christ? To understand this, we must ask the question: what is the door that lies between heaven and earth, or spirit and matter? Answer: it is the soul. And what is the soul? The soul is the Christ principle itself, the quote, mediator between God and man. Keep in mind this quote, the mediator between God and man. This is going to come up in a few minutes. The mediator between God and man. And then you make a comment in this, which is just it's just kind of funny in a way. And it says, the first great principle of the book then is that the key to unlock the door to heaven is to obtain soul contact or find the Christ within. When you first read those two verses, it's not obvious that that's talking about soul contact, but that is what your interpretation is. So we have this soul contact, which is the mediator between God and man. Then a little bit later, I'm going to skip the part where it talks about the trumpet. It talks, finally, what is the throne set in heaven? The throne of God can apply to a number of correspondences. For our purposes, the two main ones are the planetary logos, the Ancient of Days in the midst of the 7 planetary centers, and the center between the eyebrows wherein we find the inner God, in the midst of the 7 centers of the human being. The verse ends with, and sat on the throne. He who sits upon the throne between the eyebrows is the inner God, which is the master over the lower nature and reigns supreme with no one to challenge him. So we have two main concepts that we're talking about here, the mediator between God and man, and then the throne of God, which is one interpretation can be the third eye, where we can be basically on the throne of God. Now we come to the actual verses that I've been asked to talk about. And again, this is like the first verse, the first couple verses. When you read them just superficially, there doesn't seem to be a lot there, but of course with symbolism, there can be several different meanings, and you can go a number of different ways with this. And it says, the kind of as a heading, the inner lights. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone. And there was a rainbow round about the throne, in sight like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats. And upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. So we're looking at jasper and sardine stones, and there are different. I looked in the different translations of the Bible to see if there were different words that they used for these, and in all of the ones I found, jasper was used in each one, but the sardine stone was used differently in different interpretations. And one was ruby. I don't remember which it was, and then the other was carnelian. I don't think I've ever actually heard of carnelian, and it doesn't. I don't know that it matters that much, but they're just different words that they have used. A carnelian is a brownish red mineral. Ruby is obviously a red, kind of a jewel, as is a sardine stone. And then, so this is where I diverged a little bit from the interpretation that you had. And I started to think about what other stones are there talked about in the scriptures. And so I started doing a little bit of research. And it says jasper was one of the last 12 stones represented of the 12 tribes of Israel, which was mounted on the breastplate of the high priest. Carnelian or sardine stone, as well as the emerald, were also represented in that breastplate. So now we get to, this is in the book of Exodus, and I'm going to touch for a few minutes on the actual, like, where this idea came from for the breastplate. And God is talking to Moses, and he's asked Moses to call Aaron to minister, if I'm getting this right, to the office of a priest. And this is the heading in the LDS scriptures, is what it says in this chapter. Aaron and his sons are to be consecrated and anointed to minister in the priest's office. Aaron's garments are to include a breastplate, an ephod, a robe, a mitre, and a girdle. The breastplate of judgment is to contain 12 precious stones with the names of the tribes of Israel thereon. The Urim and Thummim are to be carried in the breastplate. So we'll read some of the verses here to kind of build the idea of this. The breastpiece. Fashion a breastpiece. I'm skipping. I'm not starting right at the beginning of that chapter. Fashion a breastpiece for making decisions, the work of skilled hands. Make it like the ephod of gold and of blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and of finely twisted linen. It is to be square, a span long and a span wide, and folded double. Then mount 4 rows of precious stones on it. The first row shall be carnelian, or the sardine stone, chrysolite, and beryl. In the second row shall be turquoise, lapis lazuli, and emerald. And the third row shall be jacinth, agate, and amethyst. The fourth row shall be topaz, onyx, and jasper. Mount them in gold filigree settings. There are to be 12 stones, one for each of the names of the sons of Israel, each engraved like a seal with the name of one of the 12 tribes. Whenever Aaron enters the holy place, he will bear the names of the sons of Israel over his heart of the breastpiece of decision, continuing memorial before the Lord, and also put the Urim and Thummim in the breastpiece. so that they may be over Aaron's heart whenever he enters the presence of the Lord. Thus, Aaron will always bear the means of making decisions for the Israelite over his heart before the Lord. So we come upon this idea of the breastpiece and then the Urim and Thummim in relation to these stones that are in this verse of Revelation chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. So I started to do a little bit more digging on this Urim and Thummim idea. We talked about the breastpiece and the stones, and so then I started doing a little bit more digging in the Gathering of Lights, JJ's book, in chapter 14, in reference to the tribe of Levi. It says, "They are the teachers of the word of God." Now remember that Moses and Aaron are from the tribe of Levi. "They are the teachers of the word of God, the true holders of the priesthood. They have the Urim and Thummim, light and knowledge, the key to revelation and the knowledge to God. They are the mediators between God and man." Okay, remember how I said, remember the mediators between God and man? So we have the Christ principle of being the mediators between God and man. And now we have the Urim and Thummim being referenced as mediators between God and man. Both, those were both phrases written by JJ, and they're pretty much word for word. A word-for-word correspondence between the Christ principle and this Urim and Thummim. Their destiny is to spiritually unite mankind through the spirit of the one God. So you have this idea of a physical Urim and Thummim, and then you have the idea of a more of a spiritual Urim and Thummim. So perhaps the Urim and Thummim, like Joseph Smith used, was a physical one that was used to, in a way, kind of a crutch to help him to receive the revelations that he did. And then you have the spiritual one, that when you develop the capability enough that you may not need that physical crutch of the Urim and Thummim. So then I was doing a little bit more research, and I came upon some scriptures in the Doctrine and Covenants. And this is in section I can't remember, 128 or something like that. And this is one of those ones where Joseph Smith he has asked questions, and then he's basically answering them. And it says, "When the Savior shall appear, we shall see him as he is. We shall see that he is a man like ourselves. And that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among there, only it will be coupled with eternal glory, which glory we do not now enjoy." And then he references a scripture in the Bible, John 14:23. And that scripture says, "Jesus answered and said unto him, If a man love me, he will keep my words, and my Father will love him, and he will come unto him and make our abode with him." So we have this idea of the Father and Son having abode with the person. And this is, I would suggest that a correspondence there is to be on the throne with God. When that happens, then you have the Father and the Son with you on that throne, and you're all together. It says and this is now back to the Doctrine and Covenants, the appearing of the Father and the Son in that verse is a personal appearance, and the idea that the Father and Son dwell in a man's heart is an old sectarian notion and is false. In answer to the question, is not the reckoning of God's time, angels' time, prophets' time, and a man's time according to the planet on which they reside? I answer yes, but there are no angels to minister to this earth, but those who do belong or to have belonged to it. The angels do not reside on a planet like this earth, but they reside in the presence of God on a globe like a sea of glass and fire. They are all things for their glory, are manifest, past, present, and future, and are continually before the Lord. The place where God resides is a great Urim and Thummim. This earth in its sanctified and immortal state, will be made like unto crystal, and will be a Urim and Thummim to the inhabitants who dwell thereon, whereby all things pertaining to an inferior kingdom, or all kingdoms of a lower order, will be manifest to those who dwell on it, and this earth will be Christ's. And then it says the white stone mentioned in Revelation 2:17 will become a Urim and Thummim to each individual who receives one, whereby things pertaining to a higher order of kingdoms will be made known. So now we have another correspondence here with where it says the place of where God resides is a great Urim and Thummim. So this again goes back to the idea of being on the throne with God when you open up that soul contact. So as a summary so far, the disciple has committed. He opens the door of heaven, which is soul contact or the Christ principle. He is then sat upon the throne of God, and that person now takes upon appearance of jasper and sardine stone, which may represent a manifestation of a spiritual Urim and Thummim, which, like the Doctrine and Covenants says, is the place where God resides. So you have this idea that in verses 1 and 2, you have the person opening the door, and then you have he or she being on the throne of heaven, and then once they're on that throne, they start to appear as if they were jasper and sardine stone, and then these great colors come about, which is to me look as if they were manifesting this great Urim and Thummim in and of themselves. We also have this the idea of the 12 stones of Israel and the gathering of the 12 tribes of Israel. And of course, that's what we're trying to do here in a way. We're trying to manifest the literal gathering of Israel. And we're starting to do that with the molecules. We're trying to create this molecule of 24. And so now we go into the last, into verse 4, and round about the throne there were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold. JJ says the seats in there was a mistranslation, that the word should actually be throne. And so as we do this as groups of 24, then we'll manifest this idea, the first part of the idea, which is the gathering of Israel. And once that happens, it's a kind of a continuation of this, the order in which is the disciple does this, and then there are 24 that does it afterward. And so that's kind of the same idea. We first have to have the Spirit of God, and we have to first have the soul contact come into ourselves before we were able to manifest together as 24 spiritual atoms, or 12 atoms, and or the molecule of 24 people. And so just kind of big ideas that as you're reading this, again, like I say, superficially, I've read over this verse before, I'm sure, because I've taken a class in institute in church that we've talked about this, but this never hit like this with me. The idea is that the opening of that door is soul contact, and then you're sitting on the throne of God, and then you manifest as just kind of, once that connection is made, just the colors and the spirituality that comes out is amazing. And then you have the 24 people sitting on the throne, becoming one with Christ. And then you have finally the gold. Says finally the crowns of gold symbolize the victory over the lower nature and the ability to maintain soul contact at all times, so that 24 maintain their presence before the throne of God. So it's some pretty amazing scriptures that I've glossed over many times, and it just makes you wonder what else there is in these scriptures when you have the true spiritual vision about what these scriptures mean, just how much depth they have when they're only a few short words. So that's what I have for you today. I didn't do the screen share, but that's okay. It was just a picture of an artist representation of the breastplate, but I don't really need to.
Well, let's see it.
You want to see it? Okay. You see that?
That's the guy in the blue with the breastplate on.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that this is Moses and in the red, and then Aaron in the blue. So they're in the traveling temple, I guess, and this is the Ark.
Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tyler. That was an interesting take on everything that he had there. We just might add here, the 24 elders are symbolized by the center, two very important centers, which is the heart center has 12 petals representing the 12 female energies. And then you have a reflection of the heart center at the crown. And the crown is often called the 1,000-petaled lotus. But within these lotuses are 12 petals, which are a reflection of the heart in the head. So when people think of the head center, they think of kind of something totally different than the heart. But the heart is reflected in the head. And these are the 12 male energies. So you have the 12 reflection of the heart center in the head and the heart center in the heart. And these two, when the disciple is able to feel the interplay of these two centers, then it'll be like him being in the presence of God, enjoying the 24 elders before the throne. And one other thing I might mention, it calls them, in the translation, it calls them elders, but it comes from a Greek word that means ancient ones. So they're not necessarily male. We think of male when we see these, read about this, but technically would be 12 males and 12 females. And because they merged their energies, it's like they're really neither male nor female because their energies are balanced. And one more thing I might read is this quote here from the Bailey writings. I'll just read this. It says, a human being who has taken the highest of all of our planetary initiations is termed the diamond soul, the man who can perfectly transmit the pure white light and reflect equally all the colors of the rainbow, the 7 colors of the chromatic scale. His personality here is called by the same term. It has become a transmitter of the inner light and radiance. And it's interesting that Tyler talked about the Urim and Thummim, the 2 stones, and that he mentioned that it's a mediator between God and man, so to speak. And the mediator between God and man within our being is the Ajna center, which is called the third eye. And it's composed of 2 major petals, kind of like a symbol of the Urim and Thummim. And these two major, this center is kind of a mediator between God and man, because when the third eye is open, then the person begins to see things as they really are, rather than just seeing the illusion. You get to see into the world of spirit and interpret correctly. Now, have you ever noticed when you're talking to people about either spiritual things or politics or anything involving ideas, that people either are seeing the illusion or they're touching and at least have a sense of the true reality? And you can't really see the difference until your third eye begins to open somewhat. And when the third eye begins to open somewhat, you begin to see the difference between illusion and reality. And if a person doesn't have his third eye open to any degree, all the logic in the world will not take him out of the illusion. And what they can do is they will use their brain intelligence to a high degree. You can use your brain intelligence in the material world to get PhDs, to get to be able to write books that sound authentic, but they will not be able to see out of the illusion. All of their intelligence is dedicated to reinforcing what is in the illusion. It's like you're in a play and you have to follow the script of that play. When the third eye is open, you begin to see the script and you don't have to follow it anymore. You can go out of the script. And because you have a connection between spirit and matter. How about you folks here? Do you have you seen that when you're discussing things with family and friends, that you see something so clearly, but it's like they have a veil over their eyes and they just can't see it? I see you smiling there, Tyler. Does that ring a bell with you?
Oh yeah, you'll have people with advanced degrees and, you know, supposedly super smart, just can't see just things that are obvious, and it's frustrating in many ways. And what's additionally frustrating is they use that as a kind of a something of pride. Like I had a Facebook friend, you know, ask how many people with a degree are voting for Trump, or, you know, something like that. The meaning of what he was asking for was there are no people who have higher degrees that would do that. And it's just kind of a conceit that's out there that people with, you know, it's not necessarily true that you don't have your third eye open if you have a degree, but you know, the principle is true. You can see that everywhere.
Yes, people rely so much on authority. Like if I'm discussing with people something about science, they'll say, well, do you have a degree in physics? Well, no, what difference does that make? If you, or do you have a degree in astronomy or political science or journalism? There's people out there that do not trust a word you're saying, no matter how much sense you're making, unless you can prove you have some authority over this. But what people don't understand is, like, for instance, on the argument of whether or not there was a Big Bang. Anybody from this group here could go through and study the essential details and come up with an argument one way or another, using just as much logic as the most informed scientists out there that have PhDs in astronomy or physics or whatever. And so Same thing with politics, and you can see this. What's interesting about this is the authorities of the world oftentimes come to a lot more inferior conclusions, even though they have superior number of facts in their heads about their expertise. They come up with inferior conclusions. For instance, most of our politicians are attorneys and have experience with law, but look at some of the crazy things they come up with. Look, for instance, how they can't figure out the idea that if they overspend money and keep borrowing money on our international credit cards, sooner or later, we reach a point of no return, and it's going to do us a lot more harm than good. We may have an economical collapse. They just don't take that into consideration, even though they have all this education. And they take the laws, many of the attorneys take the laws and they completely misuse them. Okay. Now, same thing with doctors. Doctors, many of them have inferior health to the average person. And you would think with all the expertise about health that they would be able to show us an example of greater health. And same thing with a lot of the people that are the ministers and preachers and priests in religion, showing us how to live the moral life. More and more, it's revealed that a lot of these guys are have spiritual lives that are much below average. So just because somebody claims to be an expert and have a degree, that doesn't mean that they can apply knowledge any better than you can. It's how you apply knowledge, which is important. And the person with common sense can approach anyone with degrees out the yin yang and beat him in an argument just because he has more common sense. Or we could say the person with a third eye open can approach anyone on any subject and come to better conclusions than the most educated people on the planet. And so I often find I've worked with just a lot of average people in my life, construction workers and so on. And just take the average construction worker. A lot of these guys have a lot of common sense and are smarter than the experts in the fields in a lot of ways, even though they don't have all the facts in their head. Okay, any more comment on that?
Yeah, JJ, when you were talking about having someone not even understand anything, it's a universal truth, I think, that you can't deliver an understanding to someone if they're not ready to receive it. It's a two-way street. You can talk to a brick wall with the same effectiveness as someone who's not ready to receive an understanding you want to impart to them.
Yeah,
they have to be ready to receive it.
and this is an important thing for disciples who do have a little bit of higher vision. It's an important thing for them to absorb, to take their next step, because the frustration for a lot of the spiritual people is when they communicate with somebody who isn't ready to receive, they get very frustrated. And we shouldn't be frustrated. We just have to accept them where they are. And this is actually a step that you can take rather than the other guy. The other guy isn't ready to take a step. But one thing that helps you to take a step is when you reach this impasse with somebody that may be a very frustrating person to talk to, is just to let it go. Say he is where he is, and I accept that. And when you do accept that, you're the one that takes the step, and he'll take it when he's ready. And that's an important point for the disciples to remember, because you meet a lot of people into the spiritual path that get very frustrated that nobody is listening to them, or they can't communicate with their family or their friends or their kids. And it tends to be very frustrating, but handling that frustrating and being at peace with it is an important step for the disciple to take.
We have to hold the space for accepting these people and be keen to wait and listen for their listening.
How many kids you got, Ed?
How many what?
How many children do you have?
My two children are older than me now.
Well, that's an interesting puzzle. No, but are you kids on the spiritual path, or are they just kind of average, or
Well,
where are they at?
they're sort of going through the troubles and the struggles that lead toward spiritual awakening.
Have you had to kind of like have patience with them when they don't like see things the way you do?
Well, I have patience because I understand where they're coming from. I understand where they are mentally. I understand what they know already.
Yeah. So they don't feel that you're trying to push yourself on them. You have a good interplay there, it sounds like then.
Well, I don't push myself because I know that I've often been told that giving advice when it's not wanted is like throwing stones at people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also we as the ones who are the seekers, we often become too invested in what we already know, and that can become a problem of limitation if we're too emotionally invested in what we've done and what we've accomplished and what we already know.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's an interesting statement. Never try to teach a pig to sing. It wastes your time and it annoys the pig.
Well, if you try, you'll be frustrated and so will a pig.
Yeah, that's what I
I
said.
bet there's a YouTube video out there with somebody who actually taught their pig to sing.
Maybe teach him. Some pigs, some
But
pigs.
DK said that something to this effect, I might not remember it correctly, but like what the disciple thinks is his greatest strength, actually it's either like hides his greatest weakness or is his greatest weakness or something like that.
Yeah. But this is often, especially with children, parents and children, because parents always have the highest expectations for their kid. They think, well, I'm gonna implant in my kid everything that I missed out on, and they think their children is just going to be a perfect them when they grow up, but then it turns out quite a bit different. They got minds of their own. So I'm sure people here can identify with maybe some of their kids not taking the spiritual path that they have. Anyone want to comment on that?
Well, my
Well-
kids haven't taken a real spiritual path, but I love them, and they're smart in their own way, and they are where they are, and you just have to accept them, and and that's all you can do, and not judge it.
Yeah, that's all you can do. My kids are all over the place on the spiritual path, and so just accept them wherever they are. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to do. It's especially with loved ones, and especially what's most difficult of all, probably, say you marry somebody you think is on the same path as you, and then it turns out they take a detour that And a lot of people have that problem, and that's something very difficult to deal with. But when you encounter a problem like this, it's oftentimes a situation set up by your soul before you were even born as a teaching mechanism for yourself. So don't think of it, when situations like this occur, don't think of it as something you have to straighten out in the other guy, but it's actually a teaching situation to advance yourself on the spiritual path. And think of the times that you advanced most on the path was probably a time of great tension and difficulty for yourself. And I know Curtis here, just a year or two ago, he went through a tremendous point of tension, something he would have never dreamed up for himself, but it really advanced him on the spiritual path.
Well,
And
your soul will put you in a position where sometimes you don't even have a choice. Your soul is using you as a puppet, and it manipulates you, and you just have to see how you're being manipulated. That's the wisdom of it. Yeah, I was in a tough spot, but I can see now the wisdom behind my soul's putting me in that position.
And it's kind of a good deal. Our soul dwells in a place that it doesn't feel any of the pain that we feel. So it can look on it dispassionately, but we look on it entirely differently. We look up and say, why God am I going through this? Why am I being punished? And the soul doesn't feel any pain at all. It just is observing and thinks, well, I hope he handles this okay.
It doesn't measure time the way we do either. So,
Yeah.
you know, it can say, hey, you know, like if you had to spend 20 years in prison, your soul doesn't care. It's just like, okay, it's a flash. So, you
Yeah.
know,
Hey,
another
JJ.
Yeah, we got a message from Natalie thanking Tyler. Yeah, and that's
Hey.
good. I'm really appreciate everybody doing this. And Tyler did a great job, and everybody that's participated so far has done a great job. I've been impressed with all of you and really appreciate it. And any more comments or questions before we sign off?
Hey, JJ, William
Thank you,
here.
Tyler.
Yeah.
Hey, it's funny how you're talking about earlier. You were saying, you know, you sooner or later you come to the realization, right?
Yeah.
Well, when you say something like that, you realize that your third eye is right over where the prefrontal cortex is, right?
Yeah.
And you think about how the prefrontal cortex works and how fear and anger and frustration and all that stuff can shut off the prefrontal cortex, just like like you're saying. So it's funny that when you're having frustration, when you're having a conversation with somebody because they can't see they can't see things the way that you see it, it's because that third eye is closed. And then when you get frustrated, your third eye gets closed. So it's a matter of I don't know, it's in the makeup of how our brain works, that, you know, we have to be able to accept, okay, they can't see it. It's not that they won't see it, it's that they can't see it. It's because that third eye has been closed, so they won't be able to see it. In order to see things more clearly, we have to be able to accept that what we know to be true may not be true. Then it opens up that our ability to have that input, if you would, because without you accepting truth as something that can change,
Yeah.
you'll never be able to hear. You'll never be able to hear the next step in progression. Does that make sense?
Sure. And yeah, there's so many things that can frustrate disciples. Like say you're at peace with yourself, and you are all ready to join a meditation meeting, and suddenly you just spent 20 minutes typing an email to somebody, and all of a sudden something happened to make it disappear. And you think, wow, I just wasted 20 minutes on this. Now I'm going to have to do it over. And now all of a sudden, the time of the meeting is right there. What do? You have to like focus. And because that frustration you felt all of a sudden will cloud your vision and seeing ability and peace. And these things happen to us all now and then, and we have to learn to be able to come back to our center when these distractions happen to us.
Yeah, it's the battle. It's the battle between. It's the battle between that physical and spiritual.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy how a little bit of frustration can shut off your ability to have your third eye open. And the same thing happens with your the physical part of it. You know, if your fear center of your brain, it releases those fear dendrites, because frustration is the same as fear chemically in the brain.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's pretty cool. It's insightful for sure.
Yeah, frustration is probably it's a word you don't hear a lot of spiritual people talking about. They use hate and fear and things like that, but for frustration is a problem that we have to deal with. And it's like you say, it's kind of a branch off from fear, perhaps. Okay, well, we're running a little bit over time. Appreciate everybody being here. Good.
I'd like to get in a last plug. If you'd like to be in our paper molecule, come on into the molecular chat, and you can scroll up and read what it's all about. And just let us know your numbers and your names you want us to use.
Okay.
So long, everybody.
My friends,
JJ,
well,
can I just-
we will see you
Can I-
next. Yeah, good to see you, Moshe, and we'll.
Can I just ask a question, please?
What's that?
Is it out of time? I just want to ask the
Oh,
question.
go
JJ.
ahead.
Okay, now in Matthew gospel, you have a statement Jesus made. He said, if the light that is in you become darkness, he said, if therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? You know, this question came into my heart when Tyler was talking about the Urim and the Thummim, about which is the light and the sound of God. But I'm just wondering, how could light, so if the light that is indeed be darkness, how can light be darkness? So it means there's a possibility, but how can you explain that to me? How light can really be darkness in the person?
You mean you're talking about the comment by Jesus that talks about if the light that in you be darkness or something?
Yes, yes. How can light be darkness? If therefore, Jesus said, he said, okay, let me just read the verse, the whole verse. He said, but if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. So if therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? So I'm just wondering how the light can be in someone, but that light is darkness. I just need a little explanation there.
Okay, well, the inner light is in everybody. Doesn't matter, it was even in Hitler, you know. It's in the politicians that you like least. You know, it's in people that irritate you. It's in everybody. Now, that light is shining outward for everybody in the universe. Some people, those who receive the light begin their consciousness then dwells in the light, and the light fills their entire being. But if they reject the light, then there's a veil between them and the light, and it becomes darkness. And so the light which is within them encounters the veil that the disciple, the person himself has put up. And so the light becomes as if it is dark because it is rejected. And eventually the person gets so frustrated in most cases that he begins to let the light back in again, and over a period of time. and until he makes the decision to either go on the light or dark path. Okay, any more comments or questions on that?
Another way of looking at it is the example Tyler brought up of like people with college degrees or a lot of knowledge in one subject. That's light. They've learned something new, but it gets in the way of learning anything else or a different perspective. So that light then becomes a kind of darkness.
That's another good correspondence. Like say, there's several correspondences to every idea like that.
Yeah, sometimes you can be too much of a smartass for your own good.
Yeah. Okay, my friends, I think we could go on forever here, but we'll see you guys next Sunday at 2 p.m. All being well. And
Bye, everyone. The force be with you.
see you then.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.